Thank you everybody for coming. Today we're going to be talking about HubSpot versus Salesforce and the total cost of ownership. And Todd from Ascend2, who put together this report, I will hand it to you to kick us off.
Well, great. Thank you for being here today. And we're going to start right off and just jump right into some data. Okay, so the great thing about this research piece was when we were approached about doing it, we really wanted to take a deep dive into the CRM and what the total cost is. And so we tried to make this research very practical, very user-friendly. We hope from this presentation today that you'll have some talking points you can take back with your staff and get started. So we're just going to jump right into the research itself. And Connor, do you want to do introductions?
If you want to do quick introductions, I can do our overview. I apologize.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Connor.
Cool. I can do introductions. So with us today, we have Todd from Ascend2. Todd is the CEO at Ascend2, which is the research provider. And they are the ones that put together this whole report. And then we're also joined by Jonathan Corbin, VP of Customer Success at HubSpot, and then myself from the Aptitude 8 side. We're the ones that actually sort of engaged with Ascend2 and asked them to put together this research. So I'm going to talk about why we did that and what we're going to cover today. And we'll go through sort of a brief overview on everything we're going to cover on our next slide. Maybe. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is there's this big debate that we're seeing in the ecosystem sort of at large. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing, but about HubSpot versus Salesforce, and companies are trying to decide what is the right platform to build and grow my business on. And what we're going to talk about is, why does this actually matter? We're going to go through some of that research. We're going to present on sort of the key findings and get takeaways from the folks here. And then we will do some Q&A as well. So if you guys have elements and questions that you want to ask, do throw them into the chat on LinkedIn, and we will cover them towards the end here. So let's start with, at the top of this, about where this conversation is, right? So we are seeing HubSpot and Salesforce. I'm seeing it in communities. I'm seeing it on LinkedIn. I'm seeing long LinkedIn thought leadership posts from folks about how and why they should evaluate these tools. And what we're seeing is the perspective is really changing in the market at large. And so 18 months ago, 24 months ago, HubSpot was really rarely in the ring in those conversations. I think the dominant conversation from HubSpot partners was, this could be an alternative. This is legitimate. And from Salesforce folks, we heard a lot of Salesforce is a lot bigger, has a lot more functionality. This isn't really something that is viable. And what we're seeing now is that conversation has changed to a really lively and proactive debate on how do we evaluate these products and how do we compare these things and what's the best way to do this. And I think the big driver of that is HubSpot has made a ton of product progress, and the product is radically different than it really was 18 months ago. And so, Jonathan, I'd be super interested in your take on that and how you're thinking about how HubSpot thinks about HubSpot in the CRM conversation.
I'll try to prevent it to bring a unbiased opinion here, Connor. But from a customer standpoint, what we've heard from customers is that competitors will come to them and they'll say, HubSpot doesn't scale. And unfortunately, that's a bit of a misnomer from years ago when HubSpot was a point solution. They had one kind of product. It was Inbound Marketing Hub. And so what we've seen, as you mentioned earlier, is the evolution of HubSpot. We moved from being just a marketing point solution to creating a platform that's really about go-to-market teams. We have multiple teams that are focused on customer interactions and customer experience. We've evolved quite a bit, and our customers have started evolving with us. That's pretty exciting. There's a lot of companies with thousands and thousands of employees who are using our products. And so to your point, we start seeing that a lot more frequently in the up market. And so our marketing and our sales hubs are top rated products by our customers and by our users. So if you're looking for an easy to use solution you can get started with quickly, on average, it's about less than 8 weeks for us to stand up a new implementation and drive impact for your business, then we think HubSpot should be your platform of choice.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Todd, I'm interested if you want to take us into this research section.
Sure. So sorry, I jumped the gun earlier, but I was excited about this research.
Todd likes to do the research. He's into it.
I'm like, come on. But,
this is the exciting part.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of exciting parts about this. But, we surveyed 332 marketing and sales professionals. And what we wanted to do and what we did was we got an equal amount of HubSpot users and Salesforce users. So we wanted to just take an agnostic look at what's going on in the marketplace. These were mid-sized companies, so 100 to 1,000 employees that were either using HubSpot or Salesforce. And I thought this was really important. 94% of the individuals that we surveyed had insight into the implementation process. So they were involved in that implementation process, and 88% of the people had done that within the last 2 years. So these were people who had a fresh, active knowledge of what had happened, and we wanted to dive right in to get their perspective on this topic. So I think everything you're seeing here today, I think is a very, agnostic look at what was going on. And also too, I think, Connor, everybody's going to be getting the survey results in the report. So we're going to just be looking at some of the highlights, but I would encourage you to take a look at the full report after this presentation. So one of the things that we did here was, we look at like overall the CRM and priority. And this is something that Ascend2 has seen over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months. There's been a dramatic shift to really taking the whole customer experience seriously. Before that, we saw that was a rising importance for companies. But I would say over this last 12 months, now we're really seeing where this is like the highest priority. How do we improve the customer experience? And we also see tied with that, trying to get alignment internally between the sales and marketing departments. And the third leg of the stool here is just, it all kind of centers around data. So, with that, I think you guys probably, Jonathan, you probably have a little bit of perspective on this as well. But this is definitely what we've been seeing, not only in this survey, but also in previous surveys.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. What we're hearing from customers and prospects, and we're seeing out there in the wild, is that 1 out of every 2 companies say they're struggling with their existing growth strategies. That means 50%. Every other company is having a challenge when it comes to how do I find new prospects? And so it's not just finding new prospects that they're struggling with, but it's also closing deals. It's retaining and growing their existing customers. That means that customer experience that you deliver as an organization is more valuable than ever. The companies that prioritize customer experience are going to have the edge in today's environment. And if you're interested in creating a great customer experience, CRM is where your customer data is stored. That's where your team works. It powers customer-facing experience. HubSpot is built to store your customer information. It's built to put that in your reps' hands at the point of interaction. And it helps you to change that experience that you're delivering to your prospects and customers, making you much more successful in terms of being able to deliver the experience your customers and prospects are looking for.
Yeah, I think that point actually is really interesting, Jonathan, because I think the other conversation, we talked about, I see this conversation all the time because we're pretty deep in the CRM space, but I think the other conversation that we're seeing a lot is everyone's trying to adapt and thrive in kind of the macro environment that's happening. And I think your focus on kind of what is your customer experience? How does someone buy from you? We're just seeing buyers across the board do a lot more diligence, do a lot more checking, have a lot more involvement in that buying experience. And ultimately, how your buyer buys from you is just as important as what you're actually selling to them. And I think at Aptitude 8, we really see the CRM as being the cornerstone of a wonderful buying experience. And so for us as an organization, our mission is really to help companies create the buying experiences that their customers demand. And we really see CRM platform as the most important technology to sort of fulfill on and deliver that mission.
And I think when it goes back to the buying experience, Connor, you hit it on the head. You look at some of the really successful consumer product companies that are out there, they've simplified their buying process down to the most macro level. And if we can continue to do that with our customers, we can help them be even more successful.
Well, and there's also, I think, with improving the customer experience, I mean, that is a huge strategic advantage over your competition. And, we see that in some data that we've done from the standpoint of companies that have provide exceptional customer experience. It translated into revenue growth. And so there is a direct correlation. And I think that's why now people are truly taking that customer experience seriously, because they're seeing the end results of it. And this is one of my favorite questions we asked. 88% of the people said that they would be more likely to switch into a new CRM if it wasn't such a pain in the ass, right? If the experience to do that was not something that they were dreading. And this kind of told me a couple of things. One was, they identify the fact that there are opportunities to make improvements, and what they're trying to overcome is just that dread of making the change. And so I think we see that, in some of the data we also found was like, there's a cost of doing nothing, right? So there's a cost that's identified in the research that we did if you don't do anything. So, one thing I think we'll find out through this conversation today is the fact that, there are ways to alleviate the pain in the ass factor, right? There are ways to do what you need to do and minimize the pain in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we really find, and I think this is across the board, CRM is hard. And I think HubSpot being easier to use still means that it's core business software, right? And I think CRM to get right is hard. Integrating into your organization and doing it effectively is a challenge. But I think for our organization, we really focus on how can we make that experience as easy as possible. I think switching is really hard and it's really scary. And the thing that we look at in this whole process is how can we enable someone to make that change and do it hopefully without a lot of pain, but more importantly, in a way that it becomes transformative is really kind of the whole purpose of Aptitude as an organization. I think HubSpot as a product not only brings a lot of that power, but I think is also really easy to use. And I think you see that in a lot of the design intentions and sort of how the product gets put together. And Jonathan, I'm really curious on how HubSpot thinks about that promise and how you guys actually put that into your process of sort of building the business and building the product.
I think before I jump to that, I want to talk a little bit about what our users say, because this research comes from people who are using CRMs. And I love this, like, I want something that's not going to be a pain in my ass. So our customers tell us, hey, we have the highest customer satisfaction on G2 Crowd. It's the top rated CRM on Trust Radius, and it's the most loved product. That's pretty cool. I love hearing that from customers. And that's the result of the deliberate choices that we made to build, not acquire each of our hubs. And the reason for that is we want to build something that has consumer-grade products with enterprise functionality. That's what we heard from our users. And that goes back to not creating software that's a pain in the ass to use or to switch to. So we help our customers get up to speed faster. We invest in everboarding through free ongoing education for our customers and for their end users. And we have an amazing support team. I've had a number of interactions with them. I actually sat there and listened in on calls with them, interacting with customers. They're awesome. That's available to customers for free. We also have an awesome CS team, which I have to talk about as well. And so it's pretty cool because with those resources, customers are able to derive value from our product faster than they can with other competitors.
Our next data point we looked at was just, we want to dive a little bit more into the data component, right? And so, I mean, your CRM, we saw earlier, it's a priority for customer experience. But a lot of people, are struggling with the fact that they're not able to get that experience through their current CRM, right? And so data is an important factor. We see here only 39% of sales and marketing professionals feel that their current tech stack makes it extremely easy to get a full view of the customer data. So guys, help unpack a little bit of this for us, as far as the data component and just how you can, what you should be looking for with your CRM.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's really hard, right? Because I think when you think about, and when I look at this, it's just like being, a CEO of a fast growing organization, like this is the thing that you want, right? You sit in the meeting and you're like, okay, well, let's get an idea of who our customers are, why, how they're coming to us, how they're finding us. Like, this is the question you want to answer. And so seeing that people are saying like, I can't do that, that's really hard to do. I think is really challenging, but I think we see that in market. This is the number one pain that we find with customers that we work with. And it's new leaders come into organizations. They don't trust the data that's there. They start asking questions. They start finding inconsistencies. They don't believe that the processes that were built on that platform actually work and drive the business forward. And we see teams start doing things in side Excel sheets, going and looking for point solutions, trying to do stuff outside of that core CRM. And I think people ultimately are really looking for, I either need to fix what I've got or I have to replace something. And that's the primary point that we interact with customers. That's like the main thing that's happening when somebody comes and talks to us. And I think that this research really supports kind of that anecdotal experience.
I think when you have products that are duct taped together, you end up with those rough edges in between where you're losing data and you have data you're collecting. It just lives in these silos and it's not that useful. So if you're running a business, you want to be able to understand, how much am I spending for my customers? How much is it? How long are they staying with me? And how do I impact those numbers? So if you're tracking CAC or LTV, you have to have accurate and useful data.
Yeah, I
think to that point, like nothing's scarier than, hey, I reported some things to our board or to investors, or I established compensation structures or did something else. And then later you find out like, hey, as it turns out, some of that data was maybe not reliable. And we, best case, we told some people the wrong stuff and we have to like walk it back. But worst case, like we've made key business decisions to go in a particular direction off of a bad map. And I think that's kind of like the biggest fear of getting this wrong, both in a platform, a service provider, any way you're going to cut this. If you're in this position, I think that this is a really, big priority problem to solve.
Yeah, I thought I was going to say, Gunnar, is like when you can't trust your data, I mean, that's the worst position you can be in. And then once you put it out there, to the executive team, then everything else after that, if it's, if it's not trustworthy, then everything else, kind of goes along that same area. So that's, I think that's something that we'll continue to dive into. But let's jump into the total cost of ownership. In this study, we really wanted to unpack the total cost of ownership, like kind of peel back the various layers to help leaders, make better decisions. So we knew it was more than just cost. So we wanted to look at the implementation, management support. Obviously, you have the software cost itself, but then also the use of the tool. We really felt like, to better understand and make the best decision, you have to look at this, really holistically. And there's a lot of things that feed into the cost. So let's just kind of start unpacking this. And Jonathan, you probably see this all the time in your conversations with customers.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I'd be looking at in addition to this list is actually evaluating the time to value. I think it's, you talked about time being so valuable to us as executives, as people, as a company. You want to make sure that you're getting the implementation done in a quick and reasonable time frame. I talked a little bit about it earlier, but our average time to implement a product is about 8 weeks. So when you think about that, getting that solution stood up, making sure that you're having the right inputs to create that good data, that healthy data we were talking about earlier. I think that's really important. So, when you start to look at some of the things that the HubSpot solution provides, we have some awesome partners who work with us on implementations. We have a strong management and support in place for our customers to be able to lean into our support teams. They have questions around the product. So I think it's, these are the right things to be able to look at and understand what is really, costing me money here and what am I paying for?
And I think we are going to dive into time here in a little while as well.
Time matters. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about time. I'm holding my tongue because I don't want to skip ahead.
Your time matters? Wow. All the time in the world. I don't know what you guys are talking about. All right, well, let's look at here software cost. How much does it cost? And we looked at this, at your overall tech stack, right? So you have to look at everything because it all has to work together to accomplish your goals. And you can see here, there's, and maybe I'll throw this to Connor. You can talk about this a little bit initially, but just kind of like what this meant to you when you saw this data come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting here and that we see all the time, right? And I think that and we support Salesforce and HubSpot, we do a fair amount of Salesforce work. And while we're aligning a lot more, we think HubSpot has a really good vision of kind of where the future of CRM is going. I think what anyone who's worked in these platforms or been sort of a GTM leader has experienced is the cost of CRM is much larger than just that base CRM piece, just on the software side, right? So in a Salesforce stack, you have Salesforce, which is your sort of base CRM functionality. You're going to have your outreach license to do your sales enablement and or your sales loft license and have your reps calling and emailing and prospecting and doing all of those pieces. You have your DocuSign license for you to be able to generate your contracts, send them, get a signature on them. You have a telephony solution that's going to add on top of that and be doing both sort of the inbound and the outbound calling. And all of that is really encompassed when you think about software costs. And I think when you're looking at sort of the total bundle, you really have to evaluate, how do I look at all of the tools in the stack that support this end customer experience versus just looking at sort of one CRM vendor to another CRM vendor? And ultimately, this rep experience that you're building and creating is how you deliver a seamless buying experience to the customer. So all of these tools are super important. The way that they work and fit into your overall business matters a lot. But I think one of the things that this research really highlights, and this finding in particular really highlights, is HubSpot being sort of all on one and having all of the functionality built in, and there are add-ons and there are apps and there's ways that you can extend the platform and integrate it into the rest of your ecosystem. But for that core rep or service user or marketer experience, a lot of the functionality is going to be in the product already. And I think that's really where you see HubSpot coming out ahead here, is not just, cost of a HubSpot license, cost of a Salesforce license. It's really, what are all the things that are included in that and how much of that is built onto that same platform. And so Jonathan, I'd be curious. I mean, you guys have been very intentional about how you do this, but how do you think about that from a pricing and software functionality perspective as you guys are approaching this problem at HubSpot?
I think it goes back to the way that we build software, Connor. We're very intentional about how we go about doing that, thinking through the end user experience and what are the tools they need to be successful with their role. And so I think what we're talking about here is the value of something that's built purposely for the end user experience and for the job that they need to do. It's something that's built, it's not mashed together. And so we've created this solution that's made for go-to-market teams. It's oriented around giving more access to data across the business versus less and limiting it. And so we think everyone should have access to the data. Breaking down those data silos is something key to us. If you were at Inbound this past year, you have heard all about that there. Other platforms have hidden fees around things like integration. And so we've built all of our products on top of core functionality. So you don't have to integrate a bunch of additional tools and solutions in order to get to the tools that you need to do in order to do your job. Other companies might acquire products, they integrate them, but that integration can be pretty shallow when you end up having to supplement that with additional tools.
And then we dove in the research, this whole topic of implementation costs. And, there's this upfront cost of a new CRM solution with your implementation. Our research indicated that a smooth implementation contributes greatly to how effective your CRM can be. 83% said they were most satisfied with the implementation of their CRM. And I was extremely saw that as effective in helping them achieve their goals. So if they got the implementation right and the cost factors right, then that resulted in the long-term effects of it meeting their goals. So I'm sure there's a lot of things you guys could talk about when you look at some of these implementation challenges, but why don't you each just grab and discuss one for us?
Yeah. We think a lot about the education and how to enable customers to get things set up and how can they go live themselves or with some light support from our HubSpot onboarding team, or in the starter side with some things that are built into their product. But we also have a lot of customers who have more complex needs. And because of that, we have a large partner ecosystem with some amazing partners like Connor and Aptitude 8 that helps customers with more sophisticated needs. Connor, for our customers with more robust requirements, how do you guys approach your implementation process?
Yeah, I think so. Implementation is one of those things that I think really matters. I think when we think about implementation cost, and as much as that's kind of the focus of what we have here, and I think it matters when you think about total cost of ownership, right? The initial implementation is a huge chunk of that, but I think that getting it right really, really matters, because I think when we talk about the risks of you can't trust the data in the CRM, it's not powering your business. I think that all starts with kind of that failed implementation. And I think HubSpot focusing on being easy to use for some folks and having them be able to get up and running really, really matters. When we approach things that are a bit more complicated. So we work a lot with organizations that are coming from a Salesforce environment, another point solution, maybe a CRM module of sort of their ERP, or even an organization that's sort of growing up for the first time and kind of transitioning from maybe spreadsheets and a whole bunch of point solutions to something more robust. We really like to approach that with strategy work first. So we really like to get deep with that customer. We do what's called a solutions design on our end, which is really this kind of discovery and strategy process of mapping out how do they do things, how does their process work, really understanding their core business process and how much of that business process should change if we're implementing a new technology and adding automation, how much of it do we need to make sure that we preserve and manage. And we really try to figure out what's this whole plan and what's this future state going to look like before we ever actually engage and start building stuff. And so we really want to understand what's the strategy, how's everything going to get put together, really align on that, cost it, plan it, know the timeline, and then come back and say, here's the plan, let's sign off on it, and let's start working in sprints and getting closer and closer to that future state with sort of this set timeline already. But I think the important thing, if you're looking at this kind of a solution, is if you're either really early and you don't have a concrete process. So if you're an early growing organization and you really are just trying to figure out how you can organize some of this stuff, you can get up and running on something like HubSpot very quickly and lean into HubSpot's out of the box way of doing things that would allow you to sort of create and manage sort of a best practice process for where you're at. And if you have something that's more complex and you either have existing sort of infrastructure that you have to manage and transform over to, or maybe your process isn't working and you're actually looking at CRM as a new way to define and build on it, I would really encourage people to work with a partner. We're one, HubSpot has lots of them. And I think that if you can really find somebody who's an expert in this, on the business process, the technology, and sort of the change management piece, you can really define and expand on how you can get that implementation cost to be worth doing. Because as we're seeing here, right, it's one of the most expensive pieces and complicated pieces of getting this whole thing right.
Yeah, I'm really glad this was called out, because I talk to a lot of customers and some of them say, I'm thinking of purchasing, your CRM product, but I don't want to pay for implementation. And it's like, no. If you're purchasing a CRM, you need to go through the process of setting it up right.
Yeah, I think it's just like if you're coming from any degree of pain, you'd hope that like, I'm in pain, I need to fix it. Like, let me figure out how to do that. But I think it's hit and miss. I think doing this well on the front end is really good. And if you can get up and running and prototype stuff, I think that's a good way to do it too. We see lots of really early stage lean teams get up and running on HubSpot and immediately start getting value out of it, which I think is really a testament to some of that core product design.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, get your strategy right first. And then I know earlier, Jonathan, you started talking a little bit about time and just how time is such a critical component of this whole process, right? Making sure that we get the most efficiency out of the time we have available. And you can see here like that, how long it takes for the implementation process is a key factor to consider. So Jonathan, you want to chat about this a little bit?
When we go and we talk to customers, one of the things that they've told us is the time it takes to implement is so important for me, especially if they're new executives coming in, they see those data silos that exist. And they say, we need to break this down. We need to have actionable data. And if you're an executive, if you're a manager, whether whatever level you're at and you're in charge of your CRM, your implementation, and the data surrounding it, you have a pretty short period of time to make an impact. A lot of companies do like 30, 60, 90. And at some point, they want to see those results. The faster that you can start producing those results in the form of actionable data, the more impact that you're going to be able to have. So it's incredibly valuable. We hear it from customers and from prospects all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you believe CRM is going to make a meaningful difference in your ability to deliver an amazing customer experience, which ultimately is what's going to power growth. And if you don't believe that at the outset, like I think about where you're investing and what software you're buying. And I think you should really come into CRM with that plan and with that expectation. Like this is going to meaningfully change and influence how we deliver an amazing buying experience. Fast matters. The quicker you get that up and running, the faster it's in the hands of your team and your users, and the faster it's influencing the way that customers buy from you, the faster you're going to actually get this to be meaningful to your organization. And that's ultimately what is a big driver of that ROI. And I think in our experience with HubSpot, and we work with sort of multiple platforms, I think getting HubSpot up and running is not only easier, but HubSpot has incredible supporting resources to help educate those end users. So I think that not only is this a little bit easier and a little bit less technical to actually implement and get set up from sort of the expert perspective, but one of the biggest challenges in doing this is change management, user enablement, getting people to adopt and use and actually be in the platform and in the product. And as Jonathan's kind of been mentioning throughout, HubSpot has these amazing support resources and free education and training and certification and helping your team actually configure and build on top of it, as opposed to relying infinitely on a vendor. And so I think that this really mirrors a lot of our experience. And one of the big reasons why our team really loves building stuff on HubSpot is, as an implementer, we love to build and create complex, interesting, wonderful things. Supporting end users to get up and running, we'll come in and we'll do the training, and it's a key to make it effective. But responding to and managing minor end user things is not where we like to spend our time. And I think HubSpot does such an amazing job of delivering this, which I think kind of goes into that cost value back to the customer as well.
Right. And then, one more component is the cost of implementation. Also, the majority of HubSpot and this is a great stat, I thought, the majority of HubSpot users reported significantly fewer folks dedicated to the implementation process than with Salesforce. So there was a resource allocation difference here between the two systems, and I'll just throw this out to you guys as far as why you think that is.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a little bit on the last slide, but I think it's intentionality. So Salesforce is really built for the IT user and the technical partner, right? Like their avatar of who they're building solutions for are for Salesforce professionals that know how to build and create things, and they're building features for those people, and particularly for IT folks that are trying to build and create stuff on the platform. And I think what you see is Salesforce has really extensive power. You can build anything on the product, but that power is really designed for hyper technical users. And HubSpot, in contrast, in my experience, is really built top down to cater to the sales leader, the marketing leader, the service leader, and increasingly kind of this RevOps user with a lot of the investments in Operations Hub and some of the functionality there. And I think it really shows in that ease of use. And while we have developers on staff and we do custom build things for customers and we do integrations and we do custom extensibility projects, the reality is the vast majority of work that we deliver for customers is managed by technical consultants who are process experts, technology experts, have a lot of deep HubSpot expertise, but aren't doing any hands-on keyboard coding. They're mostly using declarative automation and sort of building on top of the tool. And we can get those people up to speed on the platform relatively quickly, which I think ends up really influencing how people actually build and expand on the platform. And that's one of the big reasons for us that we've focused on building a business on and around HubSpot is it's a lot easier to do. And there's a huge difference in our ability to bring folks in that are experts and have a deep background in marketing ops or sales ops or rev ops, and they can come in and we can get them up to speed on the technology a lot faster than if we were building on other platforms and tools. And I think you're seeing that in market. I think there is this huge ecosystem of talent that exists in the Salesforce universe that ultimately is their jobs. And these are six-figure employees in some situations they know where the buttons are and they know how to click them. And in the HubSpot world, you're actually getting people who are maybe a little bit cheaper and sometimes comparable, but the impact of what those people can do is way higher than in a Salesforce admin environment where the skills required to just know how to make the product bend to your will, that learning curve is really, really high, as opposed to how do I influence and impact change in an organization, and has this tool help me do that? I got a little rambly. I hopefully gave a little bit of my perspective here, but
that's good rambling, right? It all but it's all coming back to some key, ease of use and how the platform's designed and all those things. I mean, as our analysts at Ascend 2 were looking at this data, we could see these trends bubbling up, right? It was kind of you could start connecting the dots on why the data came out the way it did. So let's look here at internal resources. And again, it goes back to ease of use. Obviously, once you're out of the implementation process, you still have stuff to do, and we want to try to find out how companies that are on HubSpot have, we can see on the data that people who used HubSpot had fewer employees that were needed to support their solution. Jonathan, since Connor took up all the time last time, I'll throw it to you. I'll throw it to you first, so you can maybe share a little bit of your insight there.
Connor's pretty passionate about this topic, so we may not be able to stop chiming in. But I want to take a step back, actually, from HubSpot versus Salesforce and talk about what we're seeing in the ecosystem around us. What we're seeing is that consumer apps are becoming easier and easier to use. You might say, "Oh, why do we care? We're talking about enterprise software here." People's expectations have changed in terms of the business apps that they're using. If I can go, look on an app and click a button and have groceries delivered to my house, if I can, click on a button on an app and have a car come and pick me up, when it comes to doing my day job of, getting campaigns out there or interacting with prospects, I want something that's easy to use as well. And that's what we've heard from our users and our prospects, is that we want something that's easy to use. We want to be able to purchase a product that I can sit down in front of and know what I need to do in order to perform my function. That becomes critical. And it goes back to the topic that we were talking about earlier of creating something with enterprise functionality, but consumer grade interface. And so that's something that we've been deliberate with and listened to our end users in terms of what are they looking for in the product they're sitting down in front of.
Yeah, I think only to build on that, and I'll try to keep it brief, is I think one of the big things that we see with this is we hear from organizations that, and I recommend organizations, get somebody as whether it's a RevOps leader or somebody to come in and, an administrator is going to manage and really own the product and own the platform. But for early stage organizations, you can flex into that or have somebody manage that in addition to another function for a lot longer before you get kind of that dedicated headcount. Whereas, I think organizations, and we see this in terms of the external resources required on some of those earlier findings, they need a professional services organization forever because you really have to have deep expertise in the product. And I think being able to manage some of that doesn't mean you should do it all yourself all of the time, but your ability to do some of it yourself makes a huge difference in your ability to drive change.
And this point here on adoption, and of course that comes back to the ease of use as well. Ease of use, drives adoption. Sometimes, you could have this extremely powerful tool, but if it's not being used by people, it really doesn't matter. And not even it's not being used, but maybe not being used in depth by people to solve key problems and achieve key goals. It doesn't matter. So again, we're kind of seeing this as a common thread throughout the research that we did. So if you guys want to, comment any more on that, but I think it does definitely come down to some of the talking points we've already had today.
Look, like at the end of the day, no one wants to sit there and spend hours creating workflow. If I'm sitting down there, I want a system that's easy to use. I can understand what needs to be done, and I want to do it quickly in a couple of clicks, be able to perform that part of my job and know what I need to do. I can move on to other areas of the business. I can start evaluating the feedback from customers. I can start analyzing, different aspects of my business not learning how to push a mouse around on the screen. So I think that is so important. Ease of use goes back to adoption. If it's not easy to use, you can purchase the best products in the world. It's never going to do your business any good.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to that, and what we hear on customer sentiment, I think everyone's kind of experiencing now, right? Like when you use a great product, you feel like that product. And when I think about an implementation, right? I mean, ultimately, we're building a product for an end business as well, right? We're just doing it on top of other platforms. And I think when you use a great product, you really reflect on this, like, wow, this is really propelling me forward. This is helping me do things that I can't do without this product, or they're hard to do without this product. And when you work with a bad product, it's this really frustrating experience of I'm just trying to do this thing, and this blocker for me is like this extra step I have to get through in order to get to my end destination. And I think when you think about this, if you're in that camp, I think evaluating CRM is a good way to start, because I think there is ways to have this be something that actually helps you accomplish your goals, as opposed to something that it is an obstacle that you feel like you have to constantly surmount. That's right.
That's right. So, and then this is one of my favorites too that we had from the research. 95% of those surveyed agreed that they would be more likely to switch to a new CRM if they could see the ROI within the first year. So how do we see the ROI within the first year? What is the key to making that happen?
I can do it first step for sure. I think that the ROI to first year, right? I think if you're going to make that change, I think one is go with an implementation partner if you're trying to get ROI quickly. There may be a higher upfront investment, but I think you can realize that investment in the first year. If you're coming in and you're doing that implementation cycle, because in that first year, not only because you're going to have a faster time to implement on something like HubSpot, but you're going to get really high and fast user adoption. And all of that means that you're realizing value faster with that net investment. And I think if you're looking at some of this and you pick an implementation partner, you implement onto something like HubSpot, you're going to get it right. And I think the cost of wandering and struggling and trying to get something to work for your business is really, really high. And I think getting it right really matters. And I think that the speed with which you can get this thing up and running, and the speed with which you can have your users in seat adopting, using the product, is ultimately what drives this. So I'm excited to see this finding. That this tells me that the market is open and thriving for people that are sort of evaluating on switching CRM platforms. If we can help you do that, we'd love to. But I think if you're feeling any of this pain, there's certainly ways to solve it.
Excellent. Well, I think we have hopefully now some time for some questions. So take this opportunity. If you have any questions for us, please send them in, and we will start that process.
Yeah, I can tee up the first one for you, Todd. I think you covered this, but maybe answering again would be good, which is a reaction to the original sort of 88% slide, and a question on the size of the companies surveyed.
Yeah, sure. They were mid-sized companies. So we defined that as companies with 100 to 1,000 employees was the audience that we surveyed for this.
Cool. I have another question on audience that was in here of sort of survey participants, which is industry breakdowns for B2B, question on industrial, manufacturer, and some of these other ones. But is there industry breakdowns that might be in the full report?
I believe, yes, we do have some industry breakdowns. And so download the report. If anybody has any questions also about the data, they can, by all means, they can contact me.
Yeah. Todd's great. Ascend2 does great work. The full report we have as a link that I think was in the original one, and then we'll do it as a recap too. So if you guys want to dive into the full report, you're welcome to. I have one in here, Jonathan. I'd love to give you a first pass at it, and then I'm happy to react to it as well from Ryan, which is that most of the pain seems to be for people in CRM building, and that experience is bad implementation and management decay. So he's describing sort of specifically letting the CRM and its data and the behavior in it decay without audits or cleaning or sort of updating some of these pieces. And curious from either how you see customers deal with sort of that. Well, does that resonate with you in terms of where you feel that problem is, and any other thoughts?
We definitely see that, Connor. I think like the analogy that I like to use with our customers, it's like, look, if you can buy a car, you let it sit in your driveway, and it'll look great for a couple of years. At some point, you're going to start seeing rust on it. You're going to start seeing like things fall off. It's not going to start anymore. And so just like a car, you have to be able to maintain the thing that you're doing. Your business evolves and your implementation has to evolve with that. So the business that you created and implemented your CRM for might be very different from the one that you have today. And in those instances, that's where, having a partner who works with you on a consistent basis really comes in handy. Someone who you can say, hey, here's where we want to take our business, help us set up the product to enable us to go there, and then continuing to have that evolving conversation on an ongoing basis. So I've seen really great results from customers who have utilized that approach. And I think that's something that needs to be done, whether you're working with a partner, you're managing it internally.
Yeah, I echo that 100%. I think we do a lot of implementation work, and then we do some of this kind of managed services. But I think what we often see is, and I think organizations that are incredibly effective typically look at CRM as an extension of their core business process and kind of the manifestation of it. And if you're growing and adapting and launching new products, adding new services, really evolving as an organization, you invariably are going to be building new processes and building new ways of doing things. And you really want to have somebody, and whether it's a team in-house or you're working with a partner, have somebody who's going to help you continually adapt that CRM infrastructure to sort of your ongoing, ever evolving and changing business needs across the board. Another one for Todd, though this maybe, I think you may have already answered it because it's another question about some of the audience split, was B2B versus B2C split among respondents, or if there was sort of filtering on any particular of that.
I will need to get back to you. I saw that coming in, and I was going to look at the raw data because I can't remember what our split was for B2B versus B2C. I think it was more heavily on the B2B side. But answer a few more questions, and then I'll say that.
Sure. We that should be in the whole report too. I think what you'll probably find, I know that there's industry. I don't know if there's a specific designation for B2B versus B2C.
Yeah. I will
question in here I'll read, and then I'm happy to take, and then if you want to add anything, Jonathan, you're more than welcome to. And this is I assume from somebody who's sort of in the HubSpot partner ecosystem, which is asking that HubSpot partners have traditionally come from a marketing or sales background. As HubSpot is becoming much more than a marketing and sales software, how do you think partners should set themselves up for success in the future? And so what I'll answer is I'll parrot a little bit of Yamini's communication last week at the partner event, which is, I think that the best way to thrive is to really be focused on what do customers need. And I think overwhelmingly what we're seeing is customers are really looking for business process acumen, technical acumen, helping with some of that change management. And I still think that there's a world, and there's a lot of folks who need marketing services, sales services, and those people use HubSpot. But I think that when we look at what we're seeing HubSpot customers want and need, it's really focused on core CRM, core marketing automation. How are you building and helping somebody implement and expand these platforms to kind of meet and respond to the ever-changing needs of their customer? And I think that that's really where at least we're focused. And I think anybody who's looking to sort of thrive in the HubSpot universe into the future should probably be looking at as well. Jonathan, I want to give you a pass on that only because you're close to what HubSpot customers need.
Yeah. I think what we're hearing from customers more frequently, it's not about just marketing or just sales, but it's about the customer experience, Connor. And I think that's something we touched on at the beginning of this, is that companies who are focused on the customer experience across the different touch points that they have with them are more successful at acquiring, retaining, growing their customers. And so as you think about the requirements that are needed for that, most of those aren't going to be in-house. So from a partner perspective, think about how you can impact each of those areas. And of course, you have to be a little bit discerning in terms of the target audience you're going after, the size of the companies you want to work with, all of that stuff. But I think that's what I would be keeping in mind if I was a HubSpot partner.
Yeah. Question from Ivan. I'm happy to speak about this as well, and I know that there's some interest on the HubSpot end potentially too. Which is, do you have a general comment regarding HubSpot sales versus Salesforce or SF sales from the view of an outbound driven business? I think one of the first things that we see is when you're looking at outbound driven businesses and some of that, Salesforce isn't going to have a lot of that functionality itself. You're going to be probably looking at more of like an outreach or a sales loft and something that's kind of dedicated to the outbound prospecting view across the board. And I think that when you look at those products versus HubSpot sales today, some of them have a little bit deeper functionality for sort of larger outbound teams and functionality that's dedicated to that sales manager type of view. But what I would say is we see lots of organizations and have a lot of customers that run very successful outbound campaigns running out of HubSpot. And I think the main thing that we see is really sales and marketing being a lot more aligned. And I think that we're seeing outbound in general, and especially cold, is decreasing in effectiveness across the board. And so the best way to do that is really to be looking at how can marketing be opening up demand channels and creating some of the top of funnel awareness. And then how can you be tying sales back into that? And that, in my opinion, that's a lot easier to do in HubSpot versus a Salesforce environment, because you're setting it up in Marketing Hub, you're using workflows to trigger off sales interactions, and you're sort of interacting with people, and you have a lot of knowledge about their interest and awareness of your products and your solutions. And you're able to engage with those people a lot more readily versus in the Salesforce universe, where maybe I'm creating something in Pardot, I'm kicking things over, I'm putting them into a campaign, I'm going and syncing that back over to outreach, I'm trying to build all of that together. And I think that doing those two things together is a lot more impactful than just straight cold outbound prospecting. But Jonathan, I don't know if you want to speak at all to things that are planned, things that are coming, how you guys think about that together in terms of sales marketing alignment.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing from customers, there's been customers who have done, hey, we're outbound only, we're inbound only. What we've seen is that there's an evolution. We talked about how 50% of companies are struggling with top of the funnel. And so they're saying, hey, there's going to be some companies that we can best interact with through inbound, some will be outbound. We actually need a mix of strategies in order to be able to achieve the optimum outcome. And so our approach from a HubSpot perspective is we'll work with you on setting up the instance that you have to align with your business needs. But customers aren't saying we only want to interact with you through a single channel. So you should be thoughtful about how you're setting it up as you look to the future.
100% echo it. I think multi-channel, omni-channel customer experience is the way to think about it. I think being a disconnected customer is really tough. And when you're getting hit from the outbound channel and you're engaging with the inbound channel, but you also have a service ticket open, and none of those teams and none of those people know that those things are happening because they're running entirely out of different systems, is so painful. And I think that if you can really focus on kind of this overarching customer experience, you're going to have much, much better outcomes. Yeah, go for it, please. One last comment from Jonathan.
Customer journey analytics, if you haven't checked it out, it's awesome. And it goes back to how you can track the progression of your leads throughout their entire life cycle. So that plus some of the ROI product analysis that it enables is incredibly powerful, especially for marketers who are trying to see where you're having the most impact for your dollars. So those are something that just came out, just launched. So if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Todd, thank you for putting all of this together. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. And for all of our attendees, thank you for coming by. We'll have the whole report. We'll have the recording. All of that will get sent out to everybody. And thank you so much for everyone attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.